Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Novocaine, The Man Who Can't Feel Pain, starring Jack Quaid. This movie had a lot more emotional depth than I was expecting. Given the trailer, given the title, given the premise, I thought it was just going to be a lot of shoot 'em up action, putting Jack Quaid's character in a lot of situations that were fun for the viewer and going to be pretty mindless. But what I got was something that resonated with me a lot more than I was expecting. Jack Quaid plays a lonely guy, works at a bank. Due to his condition where he can't feel pain, he has to live a pretty lonely and kind of sad life. Dude can't even eat solid foods out of the fear that he's going to bite his tongue off because he can't feel it. So, where I thought it was just going to be all the things associated with his life that would cause him not to feel like a punch or to feel somebody shooting him or stabbing him, it was all those little side things that really humanized his character more. Because out of this fear of not being able to feel pain and not knowing if something is actually hurting him to a degree that, oh, this is really bad, where you and I could tell, like, oh, I'm bleeding right now and I'm feeling pain. I need to get to a hospital. He doesn't have that. Dude can't even pee because he doesn't even feel that sensation of need to pee. So he has to set a timer on his watch. So he spent his entire life living this really regulated life on a regimen, working at this bank where he takes no risks. And that has caused him to feel really lonely. And we are introduced to his character at the very beginning where he's trying to help somebody at the bank. Somebody who's been married for a long time and he's just thinking like, man, I just want to find that person. I just want to feel love when I can't feel anything. But then this new girl shows up named Sherry, played by Amber Midthunder. Fantastic name. Everything's going great until somebody decides to rob the bank and they take her hostage. And he decides, this is going to be my time to step up. It's going to be my time to be the hero, using his nervous system disorder to his advantage. And I have to say, this movie is not for the squeamish. And I can't do Broken Bones. Everything else I'm pretty good with, but even just watching the trailer, which gives you a kind of a glimpse into one scene in particular where he's being tortured by one of the criminals. If you can't handle any kind of torturing devices, prying on people, there are going to be some moments that are hard to watch. Probably that scene in particular. Everything else is more along the lines of him getting into accidents and mishaps when he's actually fighting. That stuff is still at times brutal, but I think out of everything, the most squeamish people will have a problem with that scene. I found myself even kind of wanting to look away at points because I can't do Broken Bones. I can't do anything that harms your eyes. I have this really weird thing. If anybody gets close to my eyes, I just go into defense mode. And maybe a good thing of me having glasses is I always feel a little bit protected. But if I take off my glasses and anybody needs to touch my eye, whenever I have to go do an eye exam and they have to blow that puff of air in your eye, I have to warn them beforehand, like, hey, I have this weird eye thing. If I accidentally deck you in the face, it's not my problem. I just don't like people touching my eyes. So there are some situations where he gets things very close to his eye. Everything else I felt was pretty on par with as much destruction as I was expecting. So while this movie is about a guy who can't feel pain and the long journey he goes on to save the girl of his dreams, what this movie is really about is a guy who's missed out on life, worried that he's going to die, where he's been too cautious of taking risks, been too cautious of even putting himself in social situations. Dude doesn't even know what foods taste like because he's so worried and fearful of death that he's forgotten to live his life. And this is his chance to finally push all those things to the side. He's in his 30s and he has to go out and prove to himself, not even to anybody else, that he's not just this sheltered bank executive. He is something more than that. And it was cool seeing his evolution. At times, this felt like a superhero origin story, much like a superhero would discover his powers. He's already been dealing with this, but he didn't realize that he could use it to his advantage in this way and really just finally throws caution to the wind. You also have Jacob Batalon from the Spider-Man movies playing his best friend, and his role, I would say, was pretty minimal. He almost plays the guy in the chair in this movie as well, where we don't even get a whole lot of him in the movie despite the amount that he was used in the trailer. I feel like movies do this all the time with like the best friend, where they make it a big part of the marketing, but then they're barely in the thing. I think if there was anybody I wanted more of, it was definitely his character, but it was just kind of sprinkled in there. The love story I thought was pretty decent. I think you have to consider what it's like to be a lonely guy, because I think the average person would watch this and think, why is he so dead set on getting this girl back? They haven't known each other that long. Why is he going through these lengths to do this? And I think if you understand the lonely guy mentality of him having nothing throughout his entire life, and this being his first chance to even have a remote sense of normalcy, I think that's what allows him to go to these lengths. If it was just a guy who had already been using this power to his advantage, had already been living a life where he was reckless and not caring about what happened to his body, the story wouldn't be the same. So it's the fact that he has been sheltered, working in his office, and not going outside of his comfort zone whatsoever that makes him decide, I don't want to be lonely anymore. So if you've ever experienced a level of loneliness like this, never been in a serious relationship, you can understand why he decided, that's it. You pushed me to my tipping point. I'm going to go after these bad guys and prove them wrong and win this girl back. So for the most part, I did enjoy the movie. I thought it had a pretty good amount of action. I just felt that it moved a little bit too slow, especially in that first act where I was like, all right, let's get going here. When you actually look at what happens in the movie and the fact that it's about an hour and 50 minutes, it almost feels like they stretched it out a little bit further than they needed it to go. At times, it just lacks that sense of urgency. And for a movie that felt a little bit reminiscent of a John Wick or a Monkey Man or a Nobody, those movies move really quickly. I was kind of expecting a little bit more. It just moved a little bit too slowly for me, and I was waiting for more surprises. I think when it came to the main three actors, they were great. Jack, Amber, and Jacob had great chemistry. I think Jack proved that he does have that lead actor capability and bankability in this. I don't think this is going to be a career-defining movie for him, but it definitely proved to me that outside of The Boys and outside of the other movies he's done, that he does have the ability to step into a role like this and own it. It's also just hard to compare him to his dad. Also, when you think about, there's another Nepo baby in this movie, Ray Nicholson, the son of Jack Nicholson. You have two Nepo babies here. And I think when it comes to Jack Quaid, who's been so upfront and open about the fact that he has two famous parents, that he has been given advantages in his life and hasn't strayed away from that. He hasn't tried to hide his name. He is very upfront about owning the fact that he is a Nepo baby. And I can respect that. And it doesn't mean just because you have one or two famous parents in the industry that that's going to lead you to success. It does open up those doors. It does build in those relationships because you can go to people who your parents knew and get your foot in the door. But that doesn't mean you're going to earn the respect of the audience. Just because he has Quaid in his name doesn't mean audiences are going to go into this movie and think, I'm going to love this because it's Jack Quaid's son. He still has to earn that. I think he has been earning that with his work, that I am able to separate him from his parents. I'm actually more of a fan of Jack Quaid than I am of Dennis Quaid. I think the roles he has taken on have spoke more to me as of late. Ray Nicholson is interesting, though, because he hasn't really sold me on his capabilities as an actor. Because when I compare Jack Quaid to Dennis Quaid, I don't really put them on the same level as far as Jack Nicholson compared to Dennis Quaid. Jack Nicholson is on an entirely different level, has so many more iconic movies and awards compared to Dennis Quaid. Both great actors, but a vast difference between those two. So I think it's actually much harder for Ray Nicholson to be compared to his dad, because that is a whole other level of acting, especially when you consider where Jack Nicholson was at the same age that Ray is now. And Ray is really just being introduced to us. And I was thinking about his performance in this movie and when he was in Smile 2 last year, is the thing that really gives it away that he's Jack Nicholson's son is his facial expressions. I think of The Shining. I see that smile, that very just like zoned in look, where even on the Smile 2 poster, they put his face on it. They put his sinister smile because it's that Jack Nicholson look. That's hard, living in the shadow of your parent, of everybody associating you with him and saying, you look so much like your dad. And you can't help the fact that you look like them, but I think you can help the fact that you don't act like them. And I'm not really getting a different look from him. It almost looks like somebody doing a Jack Nicholson impression. And that could be being a little harsh on him, because he's like, oh, that's how I act. Same thing how I probably have a lot of qualities of my dad, but you don't know my dad. My dad would probably be reviewing this movie in the same way. A lot of weird things of how we pick up mannerisms from our parents without even learning them, just by growing up and observing them. So maybe that's already just built into him and he can't really change that. Or maybe he watches The Shining before he goes on a set and he's like, I got to channel my dad. I got to pull off those facial expressions and sell that Nicholson name. And I think the movie just kind of lost momentum there towards the end. It kind of struggled with finding how to end this story and how to tie together all these loose ends. Maybe that's because they were trying to set up a sequel. They're trying to build an action franchise out of this. It almost felt like they ran out of ideas, but probably what it was is they ran out of money. It's an $18 million movie, so it doesn't have that same high production value or budget that you would get from a John Wick movie. But I think this movie does have some success at the box office. They end up making a sequel. They could add some more money to make the next one a little bit more fast paced for me. So for Novocaine, I give it 3.5 out of 5 arrows to the leg.